Welcome to a journey back in time, to an era that redefined the human experience. The classical age was not just a period on a map, it was an explosion of thought, governance, and architectural wonder that stretched from the sun-drenched hills of Greece to the vast plains of Persia and the rising power of Rome. Today, we explore how these civilizations laid the very foundations of the modern world we inhabit. Our story begins with the concept of the state and the individual. In the rugged peninsulas of Greece, a new way of living emerged through the city-state, or the polis. Meanwhile, to the east, the Persian Empire was crafting the first true global superpower. These two worlds, though vastly different in their approach to power and freedom, would soon find their destinies inextricably linked through trade, ideas, and eventual conflict. The Persian Empire, under the vision of Cyrus the Great, established a model of governance that was revolutionary for its time. Unlike many conquerors before him, Cyrus practiced a policy of religious and cultural tolerance. He allowed displaced peoples, including the Jews in Babylon, to return to their homelands. This massive empire was held together not just by the sword, but by an intricate system of satrapies and administrative brilliance. To manage such a vast territory, the Persians created the Royal Road, a highway stretching over 1,500 miles. This allowed messengers on horseback to travel across the empire in a fraction of the time it took for a standard merchant caravan. It was the internet of the ancient world, ensuring that the king's decrees reached the farthest corners of the realm with unprecedented speed and efficiency. While Persia focused on grand scale and imperial unity, the Greek city-states were experimenting with internal structures. Athens, in particular, became the cradle of democracy. Here, for the first time, the idea that ordinary citizens could have a voice in their government began to take root. This wasn't just a political shift, it was a psychological one, placing the power of the state into the hands of the people who composed it. But democracy was messy and often fragile. Life in a city-state like Sparta was the complete opposite of the Athenian ideal. Sparta was a society built entirely around military excellence and discipline. From a young age, Spartan citizens were trained to be the ultimate warriors, creating a culture of austerity and strength that would serve as both a shield and a rival to the intellectual pursuits of their neighbors. The inevitable clash between these two worlds arrived in the form of the Persian Wars. When the might of the Persian Empire descended upon the Greek mainland, the fragmented city-states were forced to find common ground. Battles like Marathon and Thermopylae became legendary, not just for the military tactics involved, but for the symbolic struggle between a massive empire and a collection of independent states fighting for their way of life. In the wake of the Greek victories, Athens entered its Golden Age. This was the era of Pericles, a time when the city was rebuilt in magnificent marble and the arts flourished like never before. The Parthenon, a masterpiece of architectural precision and symmetry, was constructed to honor Athena. It stood as a testament to the wealth, power, and cultural confidence of a city that believed it was the school of Hellas. But the classical age was defined by more than just buildings and battles. It was the birthplace of Western philosophy. In the markets and gyms of Athens, thinkers like Socrates began to question everything. He didn't offer answers, but rather a method of inquiry, challenging his fellow citizens to examine their lives and the nature of virtue. To Socrates, the unexamined life was not worth living, a radical idea that would eventually cost him his life. Socrates' most famous student, Plato, took these ideas and built a comprehensive system of thought. He founded the Academy, the first institution of higher learning in the Western world. Plato explored the nature of reality through his theory of forms, suggesting that the physical world we see is only a shadow of a higher, perfect realm. His work laid the groundwork for thousands of years of metaphysical and political theory. Then came Aristotle, Plato's student, who turned his gaze downward to the physical world. Aristotle was the father of empiricism, believing that knowledge comes from observation and experience. He classified plants and animals, studied the weather, and wrote extensively on ethics and logic. His systematic approach to the natural world created the foundation for what we now call science, emphasizing the importance of data and categorization. The Greek influence eventually spread far beyond its borders through the conquests of Alexander the Great. A student of Aristotle himself, Alexander pushed the boundaries of the known world, toppling the Persian Empire and reaching the edges of India. In doing so, he facilitated a massive cultural exchange known as Hellenism, where Greek language, art, and science blended with the ancient traditions of the East, creating a new, cosmopolitan world. As the Hellenistic kingdoms flourished and eventually faded, a new power began to stir in the West: Rome. What started as a small collection of huts on 7 hills grew into a republic defined by its complex legal system and its fierce sense of duty. The Romans didn't just conquer, they integrated. They took the intellectual heritage of the Greeks and combined it with their own genius for engineering, law, and administration. The Roman Republic was built on the principle of the res publica, the public matter. It featured a sophisticated system of checks and balances, with 2 consuls, a powerful senate, and various assemblies representing the people. This political structure was designed to prevent any one man from gaining too much power, a concept that would later inspire the founding fathers of many modern nations, including the United States. But the Roman genius wasn't limited to the halls of the Senate. They were the master builders of the ancient world. Their invention of concrete allowed them to create structures of unprecedented scale and durability. From the massive arches of aqueducts that carried fresh water for miles to the soaring domes of their temples, Roman engineering transformed the landscape and improved the lives of millions within their borders. Roman law was perhaps their most enduring legacy. The 12 Tables, and later the massive codifications of law, established the idea that justice should be written down and applied to all citizens. Concepts like the presumption of innocence and the right to a trial are direct descendants of the Roman legal mind. They believed that law was the glue that held a diverse and sprawling empire together, providing a common language of justice. The transition from republic to empire was marked by the rise of Julius Caesar and the eventual reign of Augustus. This shift brought about the Pax Romana, a period of relative peace and stability that lasted for 2 centuries. During this time, the Roman world was more connected than ever. Trade flourished from the borders of Scotland to the edge of the Sahara, as the Roman legions maintained order and the Roman navy cleared the seas of pirates. While Rome governed, science continued to advance. Building on Greek foundations, thinkers made strides in medicine and mathematics. Galen, a Greek physician in the Roman Empire, revolutionized the study of anatomy, while Ptolemy mapped the stars in the known world. Their works would remain the definitive texts in their fields for over a millennium, proving that the classical age was as much about the mind as it was about the sword. The classical age was also a time of large-scale politics that required constant negotiation and strength. The relationship between the ruler and the ruled was constantly being tested, whether it was the Roman emperor managing the bread and circuses of the capital, or the Persian king of kings balancing the needs of a dozen different satrapies. The art of leadership became a complex and often dangerous game of survival and vision. As we look back, we see that the classical age wasn't just a series of dates or names. It was the era when humanity decided what kind of society it wanted to build. The Greeks gave us the quest for truth and the voice of the citizen. The Persians gave us the model of imperial administration and tolerance, and the Romans gave us the structure of law and the marvels of engineering. Together, they formed a legacy that still breathes in our institutions today.
Consider the scale of the Persian administration. It was Darius the Great who further refined the empire, dividing it into 20 provinces, each ruled by a satrap. This decentralized power allowed for local customs to remain intact, while ensuring taxes were collected and order was kept. It was a masterclass in managing diversity, showing that a central authority could thrive by respecting the differences of its subjects.
The Greeks, however, found their unity in culture rather than a single ruler. They shared the same language, the same gods, and the same epic poems of Homer. Every 4 years, they would set aside their wars for the Olympic Games, a sacred truce that celebrated the human spirit and physical excellence. It was a reminder that even in a world of rivalries, there were values that transcended the borders of the city-state. Architecture in this period was a language of power. The Persians built Persepolis, a city designed to overawe every visitor with its sheer scale and beauty. The Great Staircase featured carvings of people from every corner of the empire, all bringing tribute to the King of Kings. It was a physical manifestation of the empire's reach and the king's role as the center of the known world. In Greece, the focus was on the human scale and mathematical perfection. The Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian orders weren't just styles, they were expressions of balance and harmony. Every temple was built using precise ratios to ensure it was pleasing to the eye. This obsession with proportion reflected the Greek belief that the universe was orderly and could be understood through reason and mathematics. The Roman approach to architecture was about utility and dominance over nature. They built massive sewers like the Cloaca Maxima to keep their cities clean, and huge public baths where citizens could socialize and exercise. These projects weren't just for the elite, they were for the Roman people. By providing these amenities, the state ensured loyalty and a sense of shared Roman identity across the vast population. Law in the classical age also meant the birth of professional legal systems. In Rome, the jurisprudence began to analyze and interpret laws, creating a body of legal literature that would survive for centuries. They moved away from religious or arbitrary decisions toward a system based on logic and precedent. This transition was vital for the functioning of a complex economy where contracts and property rights had to be clearly understood. Warfare also evolved as a sophisticated science. The Greek phalanx was a wall of shields and spears that required immense coordination and trust between soldiers. The Persian cavalry and archers used mobility and range to dominate the battlefield. And the Roman legion was a flexible, highly organized machine that could adapt to any terrain. These military innovations weren't just about killing, they were about organization and logistics. But the classical age was not without its shadows. Slavery was a foundational part of all these societies, providing the labor that allowed the elite to pursue philosophy and politics. The tension between the ideals of freedom and the reality of forced labor is one of the era's most difficult legacies. It serves as a reminder that even the most advanced civilizations have deep contradictions within their social fabric. Despite these contradictions, the intellectual output of the era was staggering. In medicine, the Hippocratic Oath was established, setting a standard of ethics for doctors that is still used today. Hippocrates moved medicine away from superstition, arguing that diseases had natural causes and could be treated with observation and hygiene. This was a monumental shift in how humans interacted with their own biology. In the realm of mathematics, Pythagoras and Euclid defined the rules of geometry that we still teach in schools.
They saw math not just as a tool for counting, but as a universal language that described the underlying structure of the cosmos. For the first time, human beings were using abstract logic to solve real-world problems, from measuring land to designing the massive domes of Roman temples.
The political landscape of the classical age was also shaped by great orators. In Athens, men like Demosthenes used the power of the spoken word to stir the public to action. In Rome, Cicero's speeches defined the Latin language and the art of rhetoric. These men believed that a leader's most important tool was their ability to persuade, making the assembly and the forum the heart of the political world. Trade served as the lifeblood of the classical world. The Silk Road began to take shape, connecting the Mediterranean with the mysterious lands of the East. Spices, silk, and precious metals flowed across continents. But more importantly, so did ideas. The classical age was a period of intense globalization, where a merchant in Rome could wear silk from China, and a scholar in Persia could read Greek philosophy. The concept of citizenship was another revolutionary idea from this era. In Rome, being a citizen meant you were protected by the law, no matter where you were in the empire. It was a status that people worked hard to achieve, as it provided rights and a sense of belonging to something much larger than their local tribe or village. This helped create a shared identity that unified millions of people across 3 continents. Religion in the classical age was often a public and civic affair. The grand temples weren't just places of worship, they were the centers of community life. In Greece, the gods were seen as relatable, often flawed beings who interacted with humans. In Persia, Zoroastrianism introduced the concept of a cosmic struggle between good and evil, an idea that would deeply influence later monotheistic religions and the moral framework of the West. But empires, no matter how grand, eventually faced the test of time. The very things that made Rome great, its size, its military, its complex economy, eventually became its greatest challenges. Managing such a vast territory required an enormous amount of resources, and the pressure from outside groups, combined with internal political instability, began to chip away at the foundations of the Roman world. As the central authority of Rome began to weaken, the classical age started to transition into something new. But even as the political structures faded, the cultural and intellectual achievements remained. The Latin language evolved into the Romance languages we speak today. The scientific and philosophical texts were preserved by scholars in the East, waiting to be rediscovered centuries later during the Renaissance. The story of the classical age is ultimately the story of us. It was the time when we first asked, how should we govern ourselves? What is the nature of the world around us? How do we define justice? These questions didn't go away when the empires fell. They became the core of our modern identity, proving that the light of the classical world was never truly extinguished. The legacy of Greece is found every time a citizen casts a vote. It is found in the theater, where we still use the concepts of tragedy and comedy to understand the human condition. It is found in the very way we argue and debate, using the logic and rhetoric first perfected in the sunlit squares of Athens. The Greeks taught us that the mind is the most powerful tool we possess. The legacy of Persia is found in the concept of the global state and the management of a diverse population. Their early experiments in human rights and religious tolerance were thousands of years ahead of their time. They showed that an empire could be a mosaic of different cultures, unified by a central vision, but allowed to maintain their own unique identities. This model of pluralism is still a goal we strive for today. The legacy of Rome is all around us, in the roads we drive on and the bridges we cross. It is in the very structure of our cities and the systems of law that protect our rights. The Romans taught us how to build for the long term, how to create institutions that can survive for centuries, and how to integrate diverse peoples into a single functioning society. Our world is built on the ruins and the blueprints of Rome. Science, too, remains rooted in this era. Every time a scientist observes a phenomenon or a doctor treats a patient based on evidence, they are following in the footsteps of Aristotle and Galen. The classical age gave us the courage to look at the world without fear and to believe that through reason and observation, we could unlock the secrets of the universe. It was the first great age of discovery. Large-scale politics, with all its complexities and compromises, was born in the forums and palaces of the classical age. We learned that power must be balanced, that leaders must be persuasive, and that the state exists to serve its people. These lessons were bought with the blood of soldiers and the wisdom of philosophers, creating a political heritage that remains the foundation of our modern democratic and legal systems. As our journey through the classical age comes to a close, we see that history is not a straight line, but a series of waves. The ideas of Greece, Rome, and Persia have ebbed and flowed through the centuries, but they have never disappeared. They are the bedrock of our civilization, the source of our values, and the inspiration for our future. To understand the classical age is to understand ourselves. Thank you for exploring this monumental era with us. The classical age reminds us that even thousands of years ago, human beings were driven by the same desires for knowledge, justice, and meaning that we feel today. As we move forward into our own uncertain future, we can look back at the giants of the past for guidance, inspiration, and a reminder of what we are capable of achieving when we dare to think and build. The classical age may be over, but its story is still being written in every city we build, every law we pass, and every truth we discover. Until next time, keep looking back to see how far we've come, and keep looking forward to see where we might go next. The legacy of the ancient world is yours to carry into the future.